Welcome to the 46th Writers Week at UCR. 46 years of incredible literary presence. We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Kuya, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous people from all over the world, including UCR faculty, staff, students, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. We also offer gratitude and tribute to Kuya scholar Rupert Costo, who lobbied for and initiated the founding of UC Riverside, our school and campus, and to Rupert and his wife Jeanette for the endowment and archive that they left to ensure research in the future, and to our Costo chair and sponsor, Cliff Chasner. We acknowledge the continued work of Native American student programs, California Center for Native Nations, California Indian Studies and Scholars Association, the Reclamation and Native American Communities Faculty Commons, and the UCR CCNN Mellon Elder and Residents, Lorraine Sisquak, for their continued essential and groundbreaking work here. Further, we acknowledge the Asian, Latino, and African American communities who have built and tended this city and its surroundings, and oftentimes displaced and disenfranchised despite their labor and commitment to the area. We acknowledge the massively fruitful work of Tomas Rivera and continued work of his wife, Concepcion Rivera, and everyone who worked to create our newly approved Department of Black Study, and so much more. Please join me in thanking all of our behind-the-scenes personnel making this week great. The brilliant professor, my colleague and partner in all good things, Tom Lutz, publisher of the Los Angeles Review of Books and chair of our department. And now, please join me in beginning to celebrate one of our own Los Angeles Review of Books and UC Riverside Department of Creative Writing Lifetime Achievement Awardees, the iconic Percival Everett, as introduced by our Chancellor, Kim Wilcox, and before that, our Dean, our College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences Dean, Darrell Williams, will take the podium. Williams' own scholarship and research has largely involved Atlantic slavery and emancipation in Brazil, with a strong focus on the methods and tools of digital humanities. He is the editor of the Journal of Slavery and Data Preservation and has taken the lead on several collaborative initiatives about enslaved peoples' experience and Black digital humanities, support from both the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Dean Williams will introduce Kim Wilcox. Please join me in welcoming Dean Williams to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Good evening, everyone here. Good evening, everyone who's online. I want to thank those of you who are part of the CHAZ facilities team and media teams for helping this event be possible for those of us present and also those of us who are here virtually here. So we're here to celebrate Percival Everett, formerly the faculty here at University of California, Riverside, and now a distinguished professor of English at the University of Southern California. Professor Everett is the author of over 30 volumes of fiction, which the New York Times calls his quote, vast, gender-defying, sometimes gleefully unhinged body of work. The National Books Critics Circle, in giving him their Lifetime Achievement Award, said, quote, there are two kinds of readers in America, those who are reading Percival Everett and those who are missing out. I hope there are very few of us who are missing out here tonight. He has also received the Dos Passos Prize, Pushcart Prizes, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the PEN Center USA Award for Fiction, the PEN Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Award, Legacy Award for Fiction, the Believer Book Award, the Premio Gregor von Rezzori, Creative Capital Award and the Academy Award in Literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. And tonight he is here as a recipient of the most important of all prizes, the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Los Angeles Review of Books and the UCR Department of Creative Writing. He'll be talking tonight with our professor, distinguished professor of creative writing and chair of the department, Tom Lutz, about his two most recent novels, The Trees and Dr. No. But first, I'm going to turn things over to our chancellor, Kim Wilcox, who will present the LARB UCR Award. Chancellor Wilcox.
Thank you, Dean Williams. I just have to make a quick comment. Lifetime Achievement Award, there's thousands of jokes and comments about Lifetime Achievement Award. How could I be? I'm here to tell you, you don't look old enough. I'm just saying that. But my honor to award the award, I would like to ask Professor Lutz and Dean Williams join me, please. On behalf of both Los Angeles Review of Books and the Creative Writing Department, it's our honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, thank you.
Now it's our turn. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for helping celebrate one of America's great writers. Percival doesn't like praise, so it's going to be a little uncomfortable for you here and there as we go along tonight. But I have had the honor of and the pleasure of interviewing Percival many times now over the years. I try to check in every 5 books or so. So every 2 or 3 years. And in fact, the last time that we talked was after Half an Inch of Water at the bookstore some 4 or 5 years ago. And in the meantime, you have published 4 new books. And since you did say that you didn't want to read, and there are people who applaud this, because
usually people who've heard me read. I'm going to ask you to describe each of these 4 books, and we can do them one at a time and then talk about them, or you could just describe the 4 books as in a row. And they are So Much Blue, Telephone, The Trees, and Dr. No.
Well, I suffer from what we in my house call work amnesia, and much of what I write, I forget the next day when something is finished. I can give you some impressions of those last 4 books, but not much detail.
I want to make sure that is that loud enough? Yep, good.
No, do I need to move it
good.
closer to me? Oops, without hurting everyone.
Great.
Now I think I'm closer.
Perfect.
Well, I'll take them one at a time. So Much Blue, for me, is a more conventional sort of rendering of a story. It's not as well. A digression here. One of the reasons I write fiction and will continue to write fiction is because I believe I should be able to make an abstract novel. The unfortunate part of this is I have no idea what I mean when I say that. I don't know what it will look like. I don't know how to do it. I just believe that I should be able to do it, and which explains how why some of my works are sort of strange. They're different. They can, if not dense, then they're strange looking, as structurally challenged, I like to say. And occasionally I come to my senses and I write something that's a more straightforward narrative, not because I've abandoned that goal of creating that abstract work, but because I come back to my understanding that a so-called realistic novel is in its way already what I'm trying to make.
Mhm.
It's obviously an artifice that sits in our laps and we look at it and we start, but it's not realistic in any normal sense of the word. It's realistic in a literary sense, and we have these expectations of literary realism that are completely constructed. And so I come back to it. That said, so I make So Much Blue, which is about secrets. And in fact, the opening quote is from Diane Arbus, in which she says, "A photograph is a secret about a secret." And if I should take wisdom from anyone, it would be Diane Arbus. She's brilliant in her ability to see people, and so I think in that novel, I'm trying to see the people involved. It's a weaving of three stories: El Salvador, a period in the character's life where he's living in Paris, and his home life, which is set in Rhode Island and on Martha's Vineyard. The following novel.
Well, let's hold on a second. It is a conventional novel in a sense, but the weaving of the three stories, we're moving into three very different periods, very different places, three different, and they are woven through. It's not a Bildungsroman in which we're following a development of a character. It's not a classic novel in that sense. It's a bit of a collage.
Yeah, I guess it is. Well, it certainly is. You're right. You know, one of the things that when I think I've gotten close to making that abstract novel, for example, in my novels, The Water Cure and Percival Everett by Virgil Russell, I think I've gotten closer, and then I step back and realize that I failed miserably. It just isn't, and it's because I'm fighting against two things. One of them is that the constituent parts of my art are representational words, and the other is that readers are writers. When you read a story, you're actually constructing the part of it that I'm expecting you to construct. It's not complete without the reader. And what readers do is they connect those realities, and it becomes a story that is conventional because that's how we understand the world. In the same way, if you opened a stranger's refrigerator, you would make judgments about that person. You would know, oh, he eats a lot of meat, or he eats a lot of strange meats, or he eats only yogurt, and you would not simply make valuative assessments, but also factual ones. And so it is when you come to a work of art and a novel, you create the story, and it becomes conventional because that's how we understand the world.
You're making me want to jump ahead a little bit. Isn't Dr. No very close to the abstract novel that you wanted to write?
It was very nice of you to say that because I would like it to be, but I'm not. I just.
Well, how would you describe that one?
We were talking about this as we walked in, but for me, that novel. First of all, it's my COVID novel. We were locked in the house, and I was locked in there with teenagers, and we were going no place. And I thought, well, I have to do something, so I wrote a novel. I wrote a book, and this book, if I've written any book that I consider on the spectrum, this book is on the spectrum. It's not simply that the character can be identified as someone who is on the spectrum, but I think the novel itself is, and it's in the way it processes the world. My son is on the spectrum, and I watch him Um, and it's and I believe it's the next evolutionary step that human beings are taking. He sees things much faster than I do, and in some ways I don't understand. And through watching him, I realized that um, all of the behaviors I see are behaviors that I exhibit.
Mhm.
And we just didn't have the language when I was a kid. Um, and and so I accept my place on the so-called spectrum that we have. You know, the only suspect term in all of this is neurotypical. That's the only one that I find to be somewhat questionable. But that novel, in its uh, sort of slanted way of addressing not simply math. Math's just a vehicle for it, but in its way of addressing the way a narrative moves.
Yeah, and well, and it too has got some collage aspects to it, right? Because there's the Bondian. I mean, you can't read a novel called Dr. No and not
Yeah.
think about James Bond, right? So there's a Bondian villain.
And he would like to be a Bond villain. Yes,
He would like to be
said.
right. He actually an aspiring Bond villain, and he and he in all sorts of ways that because some of the other characters are on the spectrum, you kind of start to see kind of like evil doers.
Mhm.
They're on a spectrum.
Yeah, in fact, I think anyone who wants to make something, even if it's evil, is I think so many artists are uh, they see things atypically. Otherwise, we would have no interest in what they're making.
Mhm.
Um, um,
Yes, right.
some more than others. Then what does it take to be Brock and to start seeing things in that cubist way? It's not simply that someone experiments in seeing strangely until they find a way to do it. Well, you know, around mid 20th century, that does start to happen where people just want to be different.
Mhm.
But even that impulse is curious.
And so let's go back and describe for me what telephone is.
Um, telephone. See, you're pretty honest because I am so bad. Just at first, I don't remember them, but also I always remember working on them. Um, it's the story of a man whose daughter um, is afflicted with a neurological disease called Batten's syndrome, and for which there is no cure. Um, and not only will she die, but before she dies, she will suffer dementia. Um, and I was fascinated by that double loss, to watch someone in life leave, but they're still alive and then they die. Um, and the way he first spots this is actually playing chess with his daughter, who is a quite accomplished chess player, and she starts making mistakes that she would never have made before, as a clue to her failing um, mental state. Um, while this is going on, he is a uh, uh, paleobiologist. By the way, he studies one specific cave in the Grand Canyon. So there's a lot of talk about little bird bones and the like. His area of expertise. But he orders a shirt on eBay, and it comes, and in the pocket of the shirt is a note that says, "Help us." And of course, a note just floating. And this gets back to one of my interests in languages, is whether there is anything, such a thing as propositional content. Can words mean something in and of themselves? But of course they don't. And so he has no context for this note. Help us. And dismisses it, though those words have now been read and he's bothered by them. But in thinking about it, he decides to return the shirt and say that it doesn't fit to the vendor and buy something else. And it comes with another note. In the novel, he finds a way to, he finds his way to the source of this item that he's ordered. And it turns out that these Mexican women have been kidnapped. I don't know how many there are, and they're being held in a compound by these neo-Nazis, these white supremacists, and they're forced into labor. They're forced into prostitution. They're also forced to work in this warehouse. And one of the ways they make money is by selling stuff on eBay. So they're packing up this merchandise all the time. He manages, because of their greed and his knowledge of geology, he convinces them that there might be oil where they are, and ends up participating in a rescue of these women. The novel has 3 versions, and 2 of them end similarly, 1 ends differently, but the novels differ throughout in small ways and in large. But you can read one version and another and believe that you've read the same book. But things happen differently. So if you and a friend read this book, you might well read 2 different books and start to talk about it and find that you don't agree. And that was the real reason I wrote the novel, was to explore. Everybody always talks about the authority of the artist, and which I think is completely wrong. There is no authority that resides in the artist. But I wanted to question the authority of the reader. And so by having the 3 versions, from what I hear when this happens in classrooms, it generates fairly interesting discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, one of the things that struck me in Telephone, and I only read one of the 3 versions. I apologize. I should have.
No.
Didn't really.
Well, you can't know. You can order book after book, and you might get 15 of the same version.
Okay, I read 2 versions, but they were the same.
Okay.
Yeah, no, one of the things that struck me as a kind of something I've noticed in a lot of your work over the years is that there are these men primarily who are central characters who are just really not very good at being human beings, right? They're just not. They're not.
Are you
terrible.
accusing me of autobiography here?
they're not terrible people. Well, some of the not so great people are named Percival Everett.
Oh, that's true.
Right, Percival Everett shows up as a kind of cameo in a number of novels.
Just one actually.
Oh, and just one?
Yeah.
Well, I guess.
But he's impressive.
He's a presence. Yeah. But this guy in Telephone, it breaks all the rules that they tell you in Hollywood. In Hollywood, they tell you have to make people care about your main character, or we're not going to care what happens to that main character. And in some senses, in Telephone, you keep telling us not to care about him. You tell us that he tells us, I don't know much of anything. I know about the hole in the ground in where I'm studying my bird bones. I know about that really well, but I don't know much about anything else. I'm not very good at being a father. I'm not very good at being a husband. I'm not very good at being a person. I'm not very good at being a colleague. Right. So it's like an anti-hero, but it's not Walter White. It's not Tony Soprano. It's not a larger than life. It's like a non-hero rather than an anti-hero. He ends up in a sense, doing a heroic act, but bad things start to happen to him, and there's a way in which his daughter's disease hit me harder, I feel, than it might have if I already cared about him.
Mhm.
There was something about its out of the blue nature and the way it was hitting him as every man, undistinguished every man, that made it more powerful.
Good.
Well, let me go on then. No, I mean, but it is a tendency of yours to write about. I mean, in Dr. No, he's also very self-deprecating, right? And the characters are self-deprecating in ways that they convince us are accurate,
Mhm.
right? So it's not comic self-deprecation. It seems to be sincere self-deprecation.
Well, if you're going to be good at anything, it ought to be self-deprecation.
Because you know better.
No, I think it's true of my characters, because I think the world pushes us to do something special.
Mhm.
And it does it often because of a helplessness in the face of everything. He can't help his daughter. There is nothing he can do.
Yeah.
But he can help these women.
Mhm.
And he doesn't know that he can, but he can't help his daughter.
Yeah. You know, you said that with what you were trying to do with telephone, I haven't written as many books as you. I mean, few people have. Balzac, I think, did, and Henry James, but you're catching up to him, I think. But when I always find that I have an idea about what the book's going to be, and the book ends up being what I thought was going to be chapter one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That I always, for some reason, I always think the book's going to be more capacious than I expected. Well, then it turned out to be, except for the one I'm working on right now, because I'm letting it go, and it's now 1,000 pages.
Oh,
So
my
it
goodness.
might actually fit what I had in mind in a few more 100 pages. But are you at the point where when you decide you're going to do X, you can sit down and do X, or do they still just kind of take off and go where they want to go?
They never. I wish one would take off and go someplace where it wants to go. No, I think about works for a long time before I start writing them, because I need some kind of map. And as you know, because you're an explorer, as anyone who explores knows that a map is only an excuse to get lost, and that's what it ought to be. But I need to feel a shape of a work and a rhythm, and I can't tell you what I mean when I say shape. There's just something about the way the pages look. And I certainly don't know what any book means. That's not my job. What it means. But I do. I know it, and it's often doing sort of a second level or second order work for me. I'm answering philosophical questions that I put to myself, and often they're quite rigidly philosophical. Things about identity and Frege's puzzle is at the root of Percival Everett by Virgil Russell.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't expect readers to see that. The Frege thing, yes, because I actually reference Frege, but many of the things that I'm working through are not available to readers.
I I mean, I guess I see it a lot as I'm reading. I see you working through philosophical
good.
puzzles, and I mean, sometimes you give us little hints, like an epigraph from Kierkegaard, or right that right
Yeah,
for
that's
instance that will kind of make us think, oh, let's see where this is going. And sometimes, of course, the philosophical framework of the exploration is very clear, as in Dr. No, right? I mean, that is, and in some ways, that's the most explicitly philosophical, in a kind of Bertrand Russell way.
Well, you couldn't have said anything that makes me happier, since Bertrand Russell is one of my heroes. In fact, I'm always trying to find a way. I would love to teach a course where I use where I get to use Principia Mathematica as a literary text. But
we can bring Percival here as a visiting professor to do that, can't we? Okay, just wanted to get a commitment to that.
For that one person who will sign up for that course.
Yeah, and that is, he is one of the, but just one of the influences on Dr. No, or one of the people in the background of Dr. No.
Yes, I mean the mellow. There's so many mathematicians I don't understand are the root of this.
Yeah, but you spent time with these kind of the kind of famous proofs, the famous unprovable proofs, the famous conundrum proofs. You spent time with those, not just for the novel, but over a longer period.
Oh, well, I studied mathematical logic as an undergraduate, but and I still, if I want to cheer myself up, Gödel's proof is beautiful, but there's so much stuff in pure arithmetic that's just I read it and it just gives me a headache, and I like it because there's so much I don't understand.
Right. I mean, that's where we like to live, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
In the great cloud of unknowing.
Apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what makes people, and ends up people spending their lives in universities, right? But like, I don't get it. I have to keep working on this.
And I read book after book on string theory, and I have no idea what any of these theorists are talking about.
I can't help you.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the things that I don't think is coming across from this conversation yet is that Dr. No is kind of full on comedy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it is not Keystone Cops exactly, but it's really kind of comic,
Well, as soon as you
laugh
bring
out
up,
loud funny.
well, thank you, but as soon as you bring up Bond,
Yeah.
they can't. It's not serious anymore.
Mm.
I didn't watch a single Bond film to work on this. I grew up in the Bond movies were a big thing with all the kids in my neighborhood, and I never quite got into it. And even now, the only reason I use James Bond is if I'm on an airplane, because it puts me right to sleep. And also it's just so remarkably offensive in every way.
Right. Yeah. Can you do any of the kind of conundrums about nothing that are in the book? Can you speak them?
I wrote that book in 3 months because that's the way I speak. But I don't. I don't even know what you mean, because it's.
Well, there's a lot of wordplay. I mean, first of all, there's the kind of the whole problem of zero, and the kind of the history of zero, right? But,
yeah, and as you know, the book makes a point of saying we're not talking about zero.
Yes,
zero is fascinating as a concept. And the West was slow to come to zero because zero in some ways flies in the face of a prime mover, i.e. God.
Yeah.
And so while those in India and Arab lands and China were doing computations that worked,
Yes, right.
the West was not.
Yeah. But then there's a lot of wordplay about nothing itself, right? And then there's the nothing that is the kind of black hole kind of nothing, as well as nothing in everyday parlance.
It's not for nothing that I use that.
That's the kind of thing that runs all through it. The other thing about So Much Blue is that it's about painting,
Yes.
right? And so I wanted to ask you to talk somehow about the relationship between painting, because you are a painter as well, accomplished painter, and to talk about painting and writing and the relationship with the two things. And then, of course, math, painting, and writing would be an interesting third term in that.
It certainly would be.
Right. And I at one point, and I was starting to write some screenplays, and I realized that I had a very inadequate visual imagination. I could write, but I was not good at the visual stuff. So I decided to do some painting to kind of train my eye. And I was painting a canvas, and after canvas, did 10 or 12 things. And I was trying to do representational things, and I had no skill and no training and no talent. And so one of the things, at one point I was doing an interior of a room, and I wanted to have a lamp on a table, and I wanted the lamp to be on, and was trying to paint the light out of the lamp. And at that point I thought to myself, oh, it's about light. Painting is about light, which I think is probably day one of Painting 101.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was a revelation.
Mm-hmm.
But when your character in So Much Blue talks about painting and about his visual field, it's always about color.
Well, I've just embraced this term. I make abstract paintings,
Mm-hmm.
and I make paintings of paint.
Right.
Essentially, it's I used to start with very representational works and abstract them, and
Mhm.
my idea was to abstract the works, the images, until they were unrecognizable. My thinking being that the figures were still there, you couldn't see them, but the essence or the quintessence, whatever word people use now, of those images would still be there and available in some way, even unconsciously, subconsciously. And then it went to, here comes the math. I had made this very large painting, and the canvas was covered with equations. And all of the equations had to do with bounded and unbounded infinity. And I started painting over them and connecting them. And this was a painting that was 14 feet wide, 9 feet wide and 4 feet deep. And my understanding of what I was doing changed completely away from the images to ideas. And then something happened with the trees, where for the first time, the writing and the visual work dovetailed. And I did a series of paintings about lynching. And the show was called Once Seen, because once you saw, it was abstract. And in a way, if you saw one of them, you wouldn't know what it was. But once you realize that it's a lynching, then you can't stop seeing it. And the interesting thing there for me was how disappointed I was when anyone saw what I wanted them to see, because all the surprise would then be gone. And I'm still trying to understand what that means to me. And as far as So Much Blue, his painting, I imagine that you can't see what's in it. And I'm still trying to figure out why that's important to me. I want to make paintings that don't obfuscate meaning, but guard it. And as I say it, I'm not even sure what I mean.
Yeah, well, is that because there is something about important forms of knowledge which include that they remain mysterious to us?
Maybe I never thought that, but that's certainly possible.
You know, Aize Jama Everett interviewed you a little while ago for Los Angeles Review of Books, and he asked you about some films, and I don't know why Jordan Peele is not camped out in your driveway trying to get the rights to the trees.
Oh, well, that would be nice.
But it seems like the film that would you said. And I probably shouldn't say this if we're trying to get him to buy the rights to it, but you said that you hoped that he would stop making student films, that you wanted his films to grow up.
Well, that was
This
me
would be
on
the
my part.
perfect way to do it.
You know, because I loved his first film,
Mhm.
and I wasn't fair to say that about the last one. I just didn't like it.
Mhm.
You know, and I didn't like it because it's not a genre I care for. But I had been seduced to see it because I liked the first one so much. I don't go to, I guess you would call it horror.
Yeah.
And so I'm not the audience for that. So for me to say I don't like it is completely unfair.
Yeah, and I recognize it because I have the same problem with it. And I remember John Recchi said that he loved horror. It was actually in an interview in this room. He said he loved horror because you have the boy and the girl, and they get closer and they get closer and they get closer, and there's just as about to kiss each other. Squash. He thought that was
Well, who wouldn't like that?
funny. He thought that was very, very funny, and that's why he loved horror as a genre. But the reason I thought of Jordan Peele with The Trees is that, in a sense, I mean, it's more like a horror novel than anything else that you've written.
That's kind of zombie, you know.
Yeah.
Though not. I'm still kind of interested in the fact that some people are. It's a symbol novel. It's not a detective novel, and to underscore the fact that it's not, I wanted it to be an unsatisfying detective. You know, they're terrible detectives. Their detecting is not very good. And that's kind of my point. And I know that when I do that people who like those will not be satisfied with it. But that's kind of my desire, is to create discomfort because of the substance of the novel.
And you like creating discomfort in general. That's an
My friends
authorial.
tell me.
I mean, it's an authorial pleasure for you.
Well, it's like humor. If you can achieve that, then you can do other things. There is a comedian that I just love. His name is John Mulaney,
Mhm.
who has a bit about a man who comes and talks at assembly to little kids about being abducted, to little kids, and he's a policeman, and he says, and his whole thing is you have to get them off their game. Yeah, the kidnappers. You have to get them out of the rhythm so you can escape. And I think that's kind of it's from Mark Twain. I learned this. Humor does that. You get people laughing, and then you can do other things.
Yeah.
And because just to laugh is great, and it feels good, but why we laugh is often where the real work happens.
I have a bunch of more questions, but I think we should let other people ask some questions.
Okay.
Who would like Percival Everett to make them feel uncomfortable?
Oh, look at that. What do I do with it? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, this is great conversation. Thank you. I have no trouble identifying with and empathizing with your characters. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but when you two were talking about that, I was wondering if you're conducting a kind of inquiry into the readers or the human need to identify with and empathize. Like we have a need to do that. But as I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that probably every novelist is conducting an inquiry into the reader's ability to, but it sounds like you're playing with that or thinking about that.
Well, I think a lot about assumptions and expectations that readers have from certain kinds of stories. And again, I don't entertain the notion that I know anything more than the reader does, but I have an opportunity to call both of our attentions to some aspect of the world. And so that's my goal. You're supposed to
Does
throw
anyone
that.
want this salt shaker? Oh. Okay.
Hi. So we heard about Nope, a movie you didn't like, and then also James Bond franchise movies you aren't so fond of. And I was wondering if you have movies that you love that are very dear to your heart that you find informing or perhaps influencing your work.
I love many films. As my son will tell you, my favorite film is Lawrence of Arabia. It's I think it's 4 hours and 37 minutes, and there's no way for it to be 4 hours and 36 minutes. It's a perfect film for me. And part of it is that I saw it as a kid. But the other part is even now, just for pacing, I find it so instructive. It's patient, and I think patience is good, but it's not slow. And so there's that film, and another film that I like a lot is Antonioni's The Cliche. I learned from that one. I guess I was 17 or 18 when I saw it, and I still remember how everything in the film is framed, and not just the framing of the shot, but in the initial scene, someone actually reaches through a literal frame to put a cigarette out in an ashtray, and from then on, every shot actually has a frame. It's looking through the windows until it becomes fragmented at the end, where Monica Vitti, my first crush, was behind, I guess there was concrete pipes, all these different, and you just see her through this grid. And so, and that stayed with me sort of artistically. And so I'm always thinking of that. And so the influence, yes, a lot of films have influenced me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could you explore a little bit more with us that opening quote about a photograph as a secret within a secret? If I heard that correctly, what is, whether it's a photograph or some other work of creative technologies, what is the secret within the secret that so fascinates you?
Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. It's just the idea that, well, I love the idea that we have secrets. And someone asked me earlier when I first had kids, my sons, and it was a good question. What's the one thing that what is one thing you want to teach them? And it just came out. I said that it's okay to have secrets that they don't tell me, that it's their stuff. Now, I'm prying all the time and watching. But I think all of us need a world that is our own. And that's the beauty of stories. And now, reading is the most subversive thing one can do. No one reads something with you. I mean, obviously somebody can read something aloud to you, but you're hearing that language and you're seeing that language. In arguably the most intellectual of the arts, because it's language. Not the most abstract, which would be music, because we can't even see what it is but but when we take it in, which is why fascist regimes do something early on in their existence, which is burning books. You burn books because they scare people. And reading is more subversive even than writing, because as far as I can see from my classes, not all of us can write, but all of us can read. And that's what's so important.
Yeah, while the box is passing, that there is something about the secrets in the novels, in which there's a form of novel which is about the necessity of the secret to be uncovered. And right, I mean, this is from Sherlock Holmes to whatever, right? But that kind of uncovering the secret, displaying the secret, having dispersing the secret's power.
Yes.
Is right. Whereas in your novels, there's also often, especially in marriages, but in lots of relationships, there's the necessity of kind of figuring out what needs to remain a secret in order for the power balance and for the relationship to work, for the world to work.
Well, to remain whole and to give someone else a whole person, there has to be a world that is whole for us. We not control, but at least own.
So my question is about an interview I read with you recently where you were talking about how you recognize that your books are difficult books and that you wish you lived in a world where books wouldn't be deemed difficult. And I think this is similar and related perhaps to your comment about propaganda. And I'm just wondering what it means for you to write books that are difficult and what it means to have difficult books in the world, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't think my books are difficult to read. I think they're difficult sometimes to understand, which maybe is the same thing. I would love to live in a culture where instead of someone seeing Tristram Shandy and saying, well, it's really hard to read. It's really, say, an excitement about it. Wow, this is really difficult to read. That's the audience I want. And that's the beauty of an education, is that it opens the world to us so that we don't run away from things that are hard to process, that we run to them. So that's what when I say I would like people to not talk about difficult books.
Should we call that a conversation? I just want to say that we gave you this Lifetime Achievement Award, but it's not because we think that this should be the lifetime of achievement for you. That we want you to keep.
It's your
going.
way of telling me to stop.
We want you to keep. We want you to keep going.
I
So-
thought of that, and then I realized that living this long is a graceless thing to do.
Well, you shouldn't say that because I'm older than you. Okay, let's thank Percival Everett for joining us tonight and for your work.
And if you could give another round of exceptional applause to Lifetime Achievement honoree Percival Everett. Boost it. Please prepare to join Percival at the signing table here now to fully take advantage of this moment with lasting personal memory. All the books are available through UCR's Barnes & Noble outside and Celador's books for online orders, as well as UCR Barnes & Nobles. While you're preparing to join him, let me get a little bit of news out to you. We're celebrating 46 years of incredible literary presence here today. Thank you for attending this UCR Writers Week Festival. We hope you will attend many events this week and spread the news that we are presenting these 33 writers free of charge. Pre-registration is required for your virtual sessions, so spread the links for us too as you spread the news. Sending deep gratitude to all our presenting writers, all our volunteer panel moderators, ASL interpreters, and all the essential behind the scenes volunteers and staff, and everyone who attends these recordings in the post-festival virtual continuum, everyone attending now. We have another Lifetime Achievement honoree tribute tomorrow at 2:30 for the beloved and incredible UCR Emeritus Professor Mike Davis with Mike Songson, followed by readings from our colleagues' latest works, Professor Charmaine Craig and Susan Straight, and a very special celebration with our festival partner, Los Angeles Review of Books. Again, Tom is the publisher of this great press and magazine. This Saturday, February 18th, it's a ticketed post-festival event celebration with our Lifetime Achievement Award partner and with Percival in person. Shout out to all our sponsors and thank you for attending.